5 modifications that actually make a difference on a 2022 Plus WRX. We're talking about 5 modifications that make a difference on any WRX because the physics are basically the same. But with that said, this is going to be a juicy video. We're gonna get right to the point. This is gonna be actionable. You're gonna learn something, and these are gonna be like basically your top 5 impact mods. But we're gonna be breaking down specifically like what actually makes a difference in your driving, in your day-to-day, on the car. And because I think there's a lot of like nuance around parts and everybody's like, oh, do this, and a lot of that stuff doesn't actually make a difference. And as somebody that absolutely loves my car, has been part of the Subaru community for a long time, that literally owns a parts business, I can give you guys a rundown of what actually makes a difference. So with that said, what we're gonna do, because I want this video to be a little bit fun, we're gonna hop in my 2022 WRX and I'm gonna take you for a drive. We're gonna do some polls and we're gonna talk about parts that make a legitimate difference and probably should be the first 5 things you do because they're the highest impact parts. But before we do that, right below my face is a little button that says subscribe. If you could just hit that button, it's completely free to do. It would make my day. But one step further, we have a massive announcement coming to this channel and a massive thing coming to this channel. I'm not going to tell you guys too much, but I did go and buy another car. And its engine may or may not be working, and we're going to be doing a full teardown, full build, and we're going to make not just a lot of power, but basically a show car. And that's coming to the channel, which is probably the most exciting thing that's ever happened on this channel by like 1,000,000%. I am so excited. I'm also nervous because it's the first time I've done something this extensive, but there is a reason to press the subscribe button. Let's get into my VBWRX and talk about the biggest 5 WRX or even STI mods that you can do that actually make a difference and you're not just wasting your money.
Well, thank you guys for joining me in the car. I wanted to have more of a conversation, a dynamic conversation about this. So we're talking about 5 modifications, obviously, that make a difference. And let's just jump straight into mod number 1 that's gonna have the largest impact on your car beyond any other modification for any WRX or STI. Is just gonna be a cob axis port. It's gonna be opening the breadth of this car into the tuning world, whether you're going Pro Tune, E-Tune, you know, off the shelf. You can't really go wrong in how much it will change your car. Simply just running like a stage 2 OTS tune, off the shelf tune from Cobb is going to change your WRX. I don't care what year you drive, it's gonna make it a car that you no longer recognize. The Cobb Access port, and I'm not sponsored by Cobb, but the Cobb Access port is the #1 impact mod. It is the most impact that you can make on your car per dollar spent than any other modification by, I would go as far as saying, a metric of 100 to 1. That's how important or how impactful getting a Cobb Access port is in terms of making an impact on your car. That is through the roof, the truth. That's your gateway into making the car what it's supposed to be and not driving stock. Now, a lot of you guys are gonna say, I wanna maintain my warranty. I strongly encourage you guys to go down to the roots about why you bought this car, go to a meet, drive somebody or ride in a car that's been tuned, and you will never look back. I felt that way when I was a young guy until I rode shotgun in my first tuned, like thoroughly tuned and built WRX, and I've never gone back. And you know, just try it. The second one on our list is slightly related, but it's related not just for the power, but a few things, is putting an intake on your car. Specifically, you know, the VB and VA WRX respond really well to an intake, and less specifically for power generation and more specifically for driver experience. So on the VA WRX, which is the 15 to 21 WRX, the intake makes almost no difference from power generation. When tuned, you might get, let's say, an extra 5 or 6 wheel horsepower out of it, even with the most expensive intake that you can get. It makes a little bit more of a difference when you're pushing much higher numbers with the total build. But when you're like, if you're just thinking about just an intake, maybe you get an extra 10 horsepower if we're being hopeful, let's say. But what it really does is on the VA WRX, it makes a massive impact in terms of your driver experience, because when you take that silencer out and you put the intake in, you start to hear your car breathe. And I don't care who you are, if you hear the turbo sounds and the kind of blow-off gas sounds as a driver driving one of these, especially if you drive a manual version of a WRX, you feel a heck of a lot more in tune with the car. It's just straight up cool. It sounds cool. And on top of that, I think it enhances the driving experience so substantially that this is my number 2. This is the second impact mod. I cannot describe how much more of an immersive experience it is when you can hear all that. Now on the VB WRX, which is anything 2022 on, the intake makes more of an impact in terms of power generation and slightly less impact in terms of sound, except you still get the sound. You don't get as much that you'll be able to hear it in this car, and I really have to be pushing it. That's also because this car makes a lot more power, so it struggles less in the areas that when we're driving, you're not hearing it as pushed as hard. But it's still, number 2 mod for the VB as well, both congruently for the power and the sounds and how it makes you feel more immersed with the car. Following up with that, any year WRX, number 3 is a catback exhaust. Again, you're gonna get no power here, but it will give you the ability to hear your car, and it will change the car in so many ways from a driving experience. You don't have to have as loud of an exhaust as I do, which you can hear right now, which most of you guys are gonna say it's droning. Well, no, I'm going up a hill, I'm in 4th gear, whatever. It's gonna make a little bit of noise because I'm making some horsepower going up this hill. I'm in the mountains right now. But what the catback's gonna do is, one, it's gonna let you hear your actual car and how it responds. It's direct feedback to your engine. On a turbocharged forced induction car, these cars make power on their exhaust stroke and not their power stroke in their combustion cycle. So quite literally, hearing your exhaust is the most reflection of hearing what your engine's doing in terms of strain. I will also say, if you drive a manual WRX with an exhaust long enough, you then have sightless shifting, meaning you can shift based on your exhaust, because based on your exhaust sounds what RPM you're at, which is actually, I've never really talked about it that way until just this moment. But it's a big one. Every time I get into a new WRX that doesn't have exhaust, it's like my biggest pain point is I have to consistently kind of keep an eye at what my RPMs are, where and you'll see it when I'm driving, when I shift, I know audibly from audio signals that's the case. Now with these driving videos, one of the fun things that I get with these is I can have a little bit of fun. I can barely, look, I have plenty of room up here. I can barely get into 3rd gear when I rip this car. Second gear, I'm in 60. I'm at 60 in 2nd gear. I shift, well, it depends on exactly when I shift, but I'm shifting from 2nd to 3rd between 52 and 62 usually, depending on, again, where I've started, how I'm moving, ambient conditions. It changes a little bit, but I have a hard time finding in the New England area spots where I can really push it. It's a heck of a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. Fastest car I've ever owned by far. But the catback, I strongly encourage it. Even if you don't want something that's super loud, get something with some mufflers, get something that's a little bit more tonal. And I will also say a catback exhaust with quad 4-inch tips is probably the highest impact rear mod that you can make. The actual exhaust housings on the rear of these cars are screaming for something that fits them better and is aggressive, and 4-inch dual staggered tips, double wall or single wall, will make a massive difference in what the rear of this car looks like, and I just promise you it will look better. Number 4 on our list is for 2 reasons. 1, it's for visual, and 2, it's for very practical. And I will actually say this mod is actually probably 90% practicality and 10% visual, and that's going to be aftermarket wheels. Now I'm going to make a caveat to that. It's going to be specifically aftermarket wheels that are wider and more aggressive in stance. Now stance doesn't mean the car is lower, it just means that they are larger with a thinner sidewall for your tire. They're significantly wider. So I run 18 by 9.5, which is an inch larger than the 17s that usually come on these cars, and significantly wider going to 9.5. Depending on the trim that you have, it can be as much as a 2-inch wider wheel. Now these look fantastic, right? And you can choose whatever you want to choose for your scheme and your color scheme and whatever you plan on doing with the car. But here's the deal. It makes a big impact on the drivability and the feedback on the car. I will say wheels, probably even more than coilovers, because most people buy cheap coilovers. Really good coilovers will give you a lot better suspension and handling and feedback, and you'll feel a lot more in touch with what you're doing and confidence behind what you're doing. If you're not buying really good coilovers, I would say a wide set of very well-made rigid wheels will do far more in terms of confidence, drivability, user feedback from driving, and I would say even more handling. They take this car with its all-wheel drive with like the stock wheels. You get a lot of pull to the side, you get a lot of divoting. I live in the New England area where we have a lot more, like our roads aren't as flat, but you get a lot more pull on your steering wheel. Not only do wider wheels solve that, but it comes with the performance aspect of you just have higher contact surface area. There's performance in terms of putting down power. There's performance in terms of, you know, actual sticking to the road during G-force in steering. You're actually going to get a fair amount out of that. So I don't know how to say this. I mean, I've made a video on it about why aftermarket wheels are so important. I highly recommend watching it because I go really into the nitty gritty, but that is a high impact mod in terms of it's not just cosmetic. There's a lot to be taken out of it. Okay, and our last one here is going to be a little bit controversial, but I do think it's really important no matter what you use this car for, whether you're tracking it or you're daily driving it, no matter what you do with it, it's actually brakes. And I know that that's a bit of a bummer, but it's kind of one of the biggest, I guess, negatives coming from Subaru on this platform is the brakes absolutely suck. Unless you have an STI, the WRX both years, and again, caveat, you could have bought the upgraded brake package for the WRX during certain trim models. If you have that, it just doesn't matter. But if you have the stock brakes on any WRX, brakes are going to be an extremely high impact modification. Now, you might say to me, well, it doesn't do anything visually for you. Probably you're right, it doesn't. And it doesn't do anything in terms of being faster, so your performance isn't affected. You're also right in that. But what you will find is the brakes are so bad on these cars that whenever you do any type of performance modding and you try to have any fun with this car, you immediately notice brakes are very much a weak point. And that's not even track driving. Like, I notice this when I have to make a hard stop in traffic or something goes wrong or whatever it is. I know my brakes are not capable of truly being the power stopper that they should for this car, especially with the amount of power that I'm currently making. And yeah, when I do have fun, maybe that means I have to brake harder. The brakes are very much a weak point. I will say, from a notice standpoint, and this is why it makes such a high impact mod for me, and it's why it's 5th on our list, is that you will notice them every day. It will make such a big difference in your day-to-day driving that it has to be. It has to be number 5 on our list because it's a very much a weak point with the car. That is inarguable. You cannot have any evidence otherwise. It is just objectively like such a weak point. The brakes are horrendous. And 2, it's something that you're going to interact with every single time you drive this car. Now, performance isn't just all about straightaway speeds. That's why we buy these cars. It's about handling. It's about all this stuff. And you can handle this car and go into corners a lot faster when you can trust your brakes. So the brakes kind of do matter in terms of having, let's say, driving forward fun, in that it allows you to control your acceleration and your deceleration to then accelerate faster and sooner in curves if you have adequate brakes that are predictable over time and effective in actually giving you the right braking performance to get around, you know, slowing down in a certain tight spot and also speeding up when you don't need to speed up. And those are the 5 most high impact modifications that you can have on this car by a large margin. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you think anything else should have made this list, let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.